I've been involved in multiple exercises with various sizes of customers. If the subject of the engagement is to optimize SQL Server, this is where I start all the time. Let's check your running editions and see if you actually need them. Undoubtedly, this is the best way to save costs on SQL Server. If you're on subscription, so if you plan to migrate, if you want to reduce costs, this is the best way to start. What I noticed in all those exercises, it's a normal thing for human psychology. There's a tendency to deploy higher edition. We have an option to deploy standard and enterprise. Let's deploy enterprise, because it's enterprise, it's better. But what people sometimes don't think about, as bizarre as it sounds, the cost difference is substantial. Do you need it? Probably not. My experience tells me that 80% of enterprise servers in the States where we did a really deep dive with DBAs into used features, security requirements, they weren't needed. So they could downgrade to SQL Server standard, considering all the cons and pros of that. Then again, my experience, each time when we did such assessment, the cost of migration was lower than the money that could be saved by downgrading SQL Server editions, down editioning. Sometimes you can even go as far as SQL Server Express, which is free. It is limited. Obviously, of course, there are multiple limitations. It's not like a full-fledged SQL Server. It may be enough for certain scenarios. So why don't you review this? You probably don't need a SQL Server Enterprise. That's what my experience tells me. You may have doubts. Go to your DBAs, have a list of all the SQL servers, and ask them questions like, what exact features you require from SQL Server Enterprise? Write it down. There's a page on the Microsoft website for each version of Microsoft SQL Server, and I encourage you to check the version because feature sets change from a version to a version. If you're running, say, SQL Server 2017 Enterprise Edition, that's where you need to look. And then compare. Look what the difference is between Enterprise and Standard, at least. That's what I do. Overlay with those features that the DBA said they need. Well, in 2013, I had responses like, we need clustering. Clustering is supported by SQL Server Standard. We need synchronous replication. It is supported by SQL Server Standard. DBAs just didn't know that. They assumed such grown-up features only exist in SQL Server Enterprise. You may be tempted to say, if you know licensing, we'll license SQL Server Enterprise for unlimited virtualization. So that's not that simple. When you start downgrading, when you start optimizing those editions, you will then realize you're actually running more standard than enterprise. And with standard edition, you really have to park it very, very, very tight on a host to benefit from the costs of unlimited virtualization. A ratio that I had on average, how many instances of SQL Server Standard you need to run on a host to return on investment of SQL Server Enterprise licenses assigned to the host for unlimited virtualization. With software assurance, by the way, it was like 20 to 30 to 1. So 20 to 30 instances. The problem with that is that you hit performance limitations. You run that many SQL servers, you inevitably hit performance limitations. Unless they're very, very lightly used SQL servers, they don't consume too much of disk resources or memory or CPU, so your host can actually handle those multiple instances. Unlimited virtualization with SQL Enterprise makes more sense with SQL Server Enterprise. If you have any questions, please write them. If you want to send them in private, send them to my LinkedIn account, and we can discuss that. If you like what you've just seen, please send me a connection request on LinkedIn. The link is in the description. And please subscribe to this channel so you do not miss any of the future updates and any of the future live shows that I upload here, at least weekly. Thank you, and safe with knowledge of Microsoft licensing.